thank you all for coming. This presentation is gonna be focused on building a Tableau portfolio project. If you're a data analyst or you're in the data field, you know how important having a portfolio is when you're applying for positions. And sometimes it can be hard to create, a project. There's so many different places you can go to find different data sets. And so, yeah, I was working on building my own portfolio, and I thought it would be a great idea to just share some of the easy ways that I found that you can build your own, so you are confident and able to find great data sets and great projects to work on. So I'll say that one thing that I really have enjoyed are guided projects. I highly recommend if you're just starting out in Tableau, if you're new to Tableau, or if you need to build a data portfolio, that you start working on guided projects. And a guided project is essentially a curated project that has the topic already picked out. It has the data set available. Usually the data set doesn't need too much cleaning, although it may need a little bit. And the purpose is to really get familiar with the tool more so, instead of like actually creating your own data, finding your own data set from scratch and all of that. I think that that's a bit more advanced. So if you're just looking for ways to create really a nice visualization that you can put in your portfolio, highly recommend looking into guided projects. And there are 3 different options I can share with you today, including the one that I'm gonna share with you later on. So the first one is the Workout Wednesday challenge. If you're on Twitter or X, you know about that challenge. It's been going on for a few years. I included the link, but if you look at hashtag #Wow2024, you can find all the different weekly challenges that they have. And essentially, it's basically recreating a visualization that's been picked out for you. So it's a great way to just, do that every week in order to build your skills, get familiar with Tableau, and then also have a lot of variety of different projects in your portfolio that you can work on. And the second one I'm gonna talk about is the Tableau Data Movie Challenge. So this is a really cool challenge that came out a couple of months ago. And it's a collaboration between Tableau and IMDb. And they have all the movie and film, cinema, director, just all that really rich IMDb movie data that's available. You won't have to, connect to their API or anything. You just have that available. And there's a huge community on sharing it on LinkedIn, on Twitter or X. So again, I highly recommend if you have a really great idea for movies or actors you want to do a data deep dive into, I highly recommend checking out the Tableau Data Movie Challenge to get started. That one is not necessarily a guided project, so you have a lot more creativity. And lastly, the Back to Viz Basics project that I've been involved in on Twitter or X. So that one is, if you do hashtag B2VB, it's a bi-weekly challenge. The first week that they release it, everybody kind of works on recreating the same visualization. Of course, you can add your own flair if you would like to. And then after the next following week, they create solutions. So if you had trouble with anything, you can follow along and see exactly how they accomplished that visualization. So again, these are great tools for learning and understanding how to actually just work in Tableau. So now I'm going to talk to you about the visualization we'll be building today. So this is through another really cool organization that I found out about on LinkedIn. It's called Maven Analytics, and they really do end-to-end guided projects. It's been great. So they have some for if you're new to Python, SQL. The one we'll be doing today is Tableau. So if you want to follow along while I'm building this and you use this time to also build your own project, you can go to mavenanalytics.io, create an account because you will need that. You can go to Data Playground, then to guided projects. And the project we'll be doing is the Global CO2 Emissions Project. And then you can click on View Project, scroll until you see the data set, and then you download the data set. It should look like that right there. And the data source for this specific project is from Our World in Data. And again, the guided project source that we're working through is from Maven Analytics, if you would like to follow along. And this is the dashboard that we are going to create today. So it has three different visualizations. One is a map CO2 emissions by country. The second is going to be a scatter plot that shows CO2 emissions in 2021 versus the population of that country. And the one at the bottom is the global share of CO2 emissions by year. And so overall, the purpose of this project is to visualize global CO2 emissions. We want to map the distribution by country, analyze the correlation between population growth and CO2 emissions, and showcase the historical shifts in global CO2 emission shares. So that is what we'll be doing. All right, so this is the dashboard that we're going to be recreating. So just so you know how it looks, and we're going to go ahead and get started. So I already have the data set loaded. If you're new to Tableau, this section right here, data source, that's where you would click it. You would click add. Well, I'm not going to remove my data set, but you would add the data set. Usually it has a CSV option or a text file option. And then the data would look like this when it is entered. And so now we want to create a new sheet. And once we have this new sheet, so this one right here is going to be the line chart that we looked at. And I like to go ahead and put my titles first, just because I think it's a lot easier to really keep track of, because we're creating three different sheets that we're going to put into the dashboard. So this right here is going to be the global share of CO2 emissions by year. We're going to go ahead and add that so we know exactly which data set we're working with or visual we're working with. Okay. So now we have our measures down here and our other variables such as year and country and ISO code up here. So for this visual, we will need CO2, the measure, and year and country. So I selected each of these and I'm going to go to show me and I'm going to choose line. And obviously we don't want this to look like that. So what we're going to do is, by the way, these are marks and I'll show you what exactly this does. We put country into detail. So that right there is more along the lines of what we want it to look like. We want columns to be in year. We want CO2 to be in rows. And next, we want to change this measure because this doesn't really make sense. So what we're going to do, this is visual focusing on global share. We're going to find, click on the CO2, go to quick table calculation and click percent of total. And again, this doesn't make sense. So what we're going to do is go to compute using, we want it to compute downwards so that it's percent of CO2 will equal up to 100%. So that's more along the lines of what we want to see for this specific visualization. And just to interpret it, around 1760, United Kingdom was the global leader in CO2 emissions, so it would make sense that they had essentially 100% contribution to CO2 emissions. So now that we have that done, we're going to look at the nulls. We're going to filter out this data. And we're going to filter for top countries. We're going to go to country and put that into filter. But what we don't want to do is, or what we do want to do is filter, have a dynamic filter. So I already created a parameter. And what a parameter is essentially a dynamic filter that you can change depending on whatever number you choose. So for us, I think top 10 makes sense. We want to look at the top 10 countries that are contributing to global CO2 emissions. So we do top N by CO2 sum and click OK. So what that did is that kind of filtered out all the countries and just left us with the top 10 countries. And after that, we're going to do CO2 per capita, and we're going to add that to color. And then we want our dashboard to have a consistent color theme. Okay, when I click color, can you now see the options under color?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Oh, wait,
Yeah,
wait.
so
We
no?
see the window for color.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, okay, so you see the options where it says sunrise, sunset, diverging?
Yes, now we're seeing it.
Okay, perfect. Okay. So essentially that's what I did is I dragged country to color because for this visualization, we want to see which countries contributed the most to CO2 emissions throughout the year.
So there's a question in the chat. How does one filter a parameter in Tableau?
Okay, so in order to create a parameter, so this one right here is called top N, and we use that name N because you want to be able to change all the different types, you know, so you can do 15, 20, and the fact that it's dynamic. So what you're gonna do is you're gonna right click, create parameter. And then you can name it whatever you would like to, and you want to put a value. So when I had created top N, I put 10. And then once you do that, you click OK. And if I want to, I do want to add it to this visualization. So then you do show parameter. So now you have it right here. And in the dashboard, when we're at the dashboard stage, I will add in the top N filter as well. So then you can like actually type in like top 15, top 20, and be able to see that. I hope that answers the question, but yeah, you would just do it over here. So right click. Okay. So let's move on to the next visualization. So this one is going to be a map, and I'm going to go ahead and name it. And I'm going to call it country. I'm going to call it CO2 emissions by country. CO2 emissions by country. And so the measure that we're looking for is CO2 per capita and country. And then click show me. And we're going to choose this filled in map. Okay. So also this one, this is supposed to be for the year 2021. 2021 is the last year that's available in this data set. So it's the most recent data, and that's what we're really interested in for this map. Otherwise, it doesn't make sense. So click OK. So now we can start to see which countries, contributed a little bit more in CO2 per capita. Next, we're gonna change the color so it matches the rest of our data set. Go to colors, edit colors, and for our whole dashboard, we're gonna have sunrise, sunset, diverging. Okay. And now we have our title. So that is our second visualization. And we're going to come back to talking about all the different trends, but you can see the legend here, and it's essentially a heat map. So the ones that are closer to red have a higher CO2 per capita. And just off noticing it, I can tell like Latin America and Africa are quite lacking in the contribution of CO2 emissions by country compared to Europe, Americas, and APAC, which is interesting and something we would definitely want to point out if we're adding commentary to our visualizations. Okay, so the last one we're going to do is a scatter plot. And this one we're going to call CO2 emissions in 2021 versus population by country. Okay. So for this one, we're going to click CO2 and country, and we're going to find population. Click show me, and then click scatter plot. I'm not a fan of these open circles, so I'm going to go ahead and change that to the filled in one. Okay. Next, we're going to do, Also, this doesn't make sense having we're gonna switch this. So if you click swap rows, it automatically does it for you, which is great. We'll have CO2 the columns and population in the rows. It's just easier to read. And we can go ahead and filter out the nulls as well. Click nulls and then filter data. And so now what we want to do is also add temperature change. Temperature change from CO2 to size. So we have that differentiation. And this one will also be filtered by year to 2021. And I'm also going to add country labels. So it's easier to understand. Okay. And so the interesting with this one is we're going to add a regression line to this. So to do that, you go to the data pane and you click analytics, and then you can click trend line. And then you drag the trend line to linear. And then once I'm in linear, I'm also going to format this to a dotted line. Great. So the purpose of this is to essentially to make the most of this visualization and understand if there's a significant relationship between population and CO2. And the way you can interpret this is if you look at China, you can see that their population has grown or is quite high, and their CO2 emissions are quite high. But the way you kind of look at this is their CO2 emissions are proportional to their population growth. For India, India also has a really large population, but they don't really have that high of of CO2 emissions. So India's population growth is not proportional to their CO2 emissions. And if you look at the United States, it's also not proportionate because we don't have, compared to China, we don't have that high of a population, but look at our CO2 contribution, it's quite high. So that's how you would interpret that. And so now we are going to, we also need to do CO2 per capita. And we're going to add that to color. We can also tell that story. And then we're going to change that to our sunrise, sunset diverging color palette. So again, you can kind of see which country has its most CO2 per capita, United States and Russia, with China not far behind. So those are our 3 different sheets that we were able to create. And now that we have each piece of the puzzle, we can put that together in a dashboard. So the way you do that in Tableau, you click New Dashboard. And so that's titled Sheets 8, 9, and 10. Let's see. Sheet 8, we want, since that's a really beautiful line chart throughout the years, we're going to put that at the bottom. And then we want our beautiful map on the right or on the left, and then we'll put this one on the right. And then we also want to add a space for a title. Where is the title? Oh, text. Okay. Actually, I'll come back to that. This right here we don't need this, so we can remove that from the dashboard. We want to keep the top N, so we're going to make this floating so we can move it around, and it belongs to this chart here, so we'll keep it there. And same with this one, we'll make that floating, and we'll put that somewhere around this area, and we can remove the container. I'm going to change the width of the dashboard to 1300. So it looks nicer. Great. And I'm gonna add a title. So we'll call this Global CO2 Emissions. Make that really big. Okay. Oops, let's change that. All right. I also want this to be in the middle. Okay. You can add that there and make sure that the top N is for this dashboard. Okay. So there's a lot more formatting that you can do to make something look a lot better. And it kind of changes for each, actually. Oh, so if you go on the left and you click size, what I did is I manually made it 1300 by 800, but actually the better thing to do is click automatic. So it does it automatically for your screen, because right now I'm on the laptop. Perfect. Um, and one other thing we want to add actually is country filter. So you can look at a specific country. And then you want to format this as a drop down, single value drop down. Oops, no, multiple value drop down. Oh, okay. And then also make this floating and make it smaller. That could be at the top. If you were interested in looking at the CO2 emissions from a specific country. So yeah, I think we were able to create a really interesting dashboard. And not that it didn't take a lot of time. So I think that's what's so great about guided projects is it's kind of curated for you to already easily be able to reproduce this. So I hope that that was helpful, and we can now go back to the presentation and maybe answer some questions about what we see. But yeah, I'll just point out, like here, you can see, actually, let me add country so it's easier to understand, and labels. And then I go back to my dashboard. Now it has labels. Cool. So now we see that in 2021, China has the highest contribution or the highest contribution to CO2 emissions in that year. And the United States uh, is second. And it used to be the UK, but UK was eclipsed by United States, which was then eclipsed by China around 2005. So there's a lot of really interesting information here that you can uh, include in your portfolio. So now heading back to the PowerPoint. So here, again, if we want to add commentary to our visualizations, which is important, I always like to put a disclaimer about what exactly the purpose of the dashboard is, because somebody who's first looking at it might not really understand what the purpose is, so it's important to have that. And then within each of the different visualizations, it's good to also have information about what exactly is going on there. And we've already noticed some things. So here we have the purpose of the visualization, which could go under the title, which is to visualize global CO2 emissions, map the distribution of the countries, analyze the correlation between population growth and CO2 emissions, and showcase the historical shifts in global CO2 emission shares. Oops, what are the trends that can be seen? So like we said, the CO2 per capita was very low in Africa and South America in comparison to North America, Europe, and APAC. And we noticed while China was rising in its contribution to CO2 emissions, it was proportional to its population growth, unlike the United States, which is overly contributing to CO2 emissions. And we also saw that US had the greatest contribution to global temperature change in 2021. And the trends over time, the UK was the global leader in contribution to CO2 per capita until about 1890, when the US took over, and then China surpassed the United States in 2005. And let me go back to the dashboard real quick so I can show you one that I did that has the commentary under. I also like to add data source. I think that's a very important thing to add. A bit more time, I probably would also go under each of these different visualizations. I would pick out those important trends that we were talking about, and I'd probably point it out right here so that when I'm showing my portfolio, people know that I was really understanding what I was doing. So thank you so much. That is all that I have prepared for today, but I'm happy to take any questions if anybody has any, or send the links to those other guided projects if you all are interested in participating in those weekly challenges. Kimberly, yes.
Yes, I have a quick question, and this is, I know Tableau is very good with dynamic dynamic data changes, and I was wondering, how do you represent that on your portfolio project, or do you just share them the link to the dashboard and let them, whoever's viewing it, play around with it to see any other dynamic stuff?
Yeah, so you mean specifically for the top N, this one right here?
Yes.
I would probably keep it as is. I would probably point it out. So one other thing I didn't do here that which might be helpful is to point out what people can actually filter by. So when people go to your Tableau public portfolio and they're looking through this dashboard, usually for work, what I will do for the filters is I have like a little star sign, and then I say, use this filter to change the country, or I kind of like point it out to them. So for the top N, you could do that. You could put some type of instructions of like, change the number of countries that you're interested in analyzing. And so someone knows that they can type in 15, 20, 30, whatever their analysis calls for. So yeah, that's also, I think, best practice for dashboards is to make sure that people know what different features are available and what they could edit and stuff. So thank you for asking that.
Great, thank you.
That's a great tip to add the data source onto the dashboard. I will be implementing that ASAP. Thanks for sharing, Hannah.
Yes, I think it's just always good to give credit where credit is due. And then also, as somebody who, whenever I look at people's dashboards, if their data is from a free source, I really like to see that because it's just useful for whoever is looking at your analysis. Probably they're interested in the topic that you chose. So you want to tell them like, I got the data from here, so they can go and they can also get the data and do their own analysis. So yeah, highly recommend adding data sources.
And I usually do include the source, but just not on the dashboard. That's what's new for me, because normally your dashboard would be part of a poster or something like that. So you'd have to, you'd be required to kind of list it there. But I love the idea of putting it actually on the dashboard itself, as opposed to just listing it like somewhere in your presentation or somewhere like that. So again,
Yeah.
great tip.
Yes, thank you, thank you. Yeah, I don't like hide and seek, so hopefully, I always appreciate when people have it right front and center, so I can also use their data. So, have any other questions?
Have you done any predictive modeling in Tableau?
So this was the first time I actually used this functionality, and that's why I really enjoy these guided projects, because they walk you through it. So I usually, when I do dashboards, it's doing something like a line chart or a scatter plot, but not really adding all the different cool features that Tableau has available. So for this visualization right here, for the linear regression, I mean that's really nice. And I learned that through doing this guided project. And now I'm thinking about all the different projects that I could, do modeling in and do different regressions. So yeah, I think it was a really great project, and I highly recommend everybody go to, because you essentially did the project with me right now. So I highly recommend going to Maven Analytics, making an account, and just building this data set, they really do walk you through it. And then you have this available for you as well as a portfolio project.
And you said Maven Analytics?
Yes, yeah. And they have so many projects, so I really recommend taking a look. Because again, it's not just Tableau. They have, I think they have Power BI, they have SQL, they have Python. So it's a really great walkthrough. If you're just even learning a new software, highly recommend it. Yeah, thank you so much.